My next guest is a former deputy leader of the Conservative Party, and she's a current member of the Advisory Committee on Canada-U.S. Economic Relations, also the vice chair in the office of the CEO at CIBC. Lisa Raitt is with me now. Very good of you to be with us tonight. So we've got more or less radio silence from Mark Carney's office, watching Truth Social. Nothing yet from Donald Trump. What does your gut tell you about how things are going down?
I'm optimistic by nature, and I haven't lost that yet. So let's say I'm slightly optimistic. I think it's positive that I'm reading reports and hearing that there at least is a deal before the prime minister and before the president. That means the work at the table concluded, and they did put something together that they thought was acceptable to send up the food chain. And now it's up to both the prime minister and the president to determine whether or not this is enough. And I concur with what your other guests have talked about. The reason why we're in this moment is because of those Section 338 tariffs, 50% tariff, that is responding, the Americans say, to discrimination Canada is leveling against the United States in dairy and auto and in the booze ban. But the impacts are far-ranging. It's very wide. It's not just in those three areas. And it can have an incredibly difficult outcome, especially in BC, Ontario, and Quebec, should these tariffs bite at midnight tonight.
You know, trade negotiations, of course, are confrontational, but they're often, held in private, and then it's announced. This really feels like the whole country is along for the ride on this one. What kind of advice do you have Canadians for Canadians as we go through this?
Well, my advice is to pay attention. My advice is to take a hard look at whether or not we are better with a deal or not with a deal. I'll tell you where I land on this after listening over the past number of weeks to the briefings and understanding what's happening at the table and understanding the impact of tariffs on the companies across Canada. I am very much in favor of some kind of a deal being worked out. I think the tariffs associated with Section 338 actually seek to subvert CUSMA and USMCA. I think that's incredibly dangerous. Up until this moment, we've been able to tuck ourselves underneath the provisions of CUSMA and been able to weather those Section 232 tariffs on steel and aluminum and softwood lumber with the appropriate supports. I don't know what we are going to be able to do as a country if the other tariffs actually hit us tonight at midnight. So I would say to Canadians, a deal is very important at this moment in time, especially to get rid of the tariffs that seem to be coming down the barrel at us.
I guess there is a third option, and that is this deadline could get pushed. But if it does, what are the consequences of that? How do you keep these kind of negotiations going with this kind of instability?
You know, if there's a bright spot, and I don't even know if I can call it a bright spot, quite frankly, but one thing that this presidential decree did do is it definitely put both Canadian and United States negotiators at a table together on a daily basis for the last month to try to come to some agreement as to what makes sense on all of these tariffs and how to move forward together as perhaps a North American approach to some of the bigger issues that we face, critical minerals, security, defense, all those kinds of things. Without having that kind of real deadline, I worry that the negotiations will just kind of cease and we won't be able to progress any further. Having a goal or having a deadline is extremely important in trying to bring the parties to a conclusion. Happens in labor negotiations all the time. We wouldn't have that if Mr. Trump decides to say that I'm not going to do it today, but I may do it tomorrow. That uncertainty isn't helpful. In any event, it's they could be charging this at the border now because people are trying to guess what's going to be happening in the future.
And I guess if we can guess about what might be happening, this silence, as I mentioned off the top, can you make any kind of a guesswork about what is going on right now that we can't see?
I would say that the people in the president's office and some of the other trade leaders are watching our media. They're probably taking note of what's being said on your program right now and how are Canadians reacting, judging whether or not they have leverage over Canada and what they may be able to extract at the last minute in order to put the deal over the edge. I understand, and I believe it to be true, that the United States, especially in some of those offices, is paying very close attention to what is being said by Canadian leaders in order to guide them in how they're approaching the negotiations. So I think quietness is not a bad thing necessarily. And, we'll know everything in due course, but I do believe, I'm going to tell you this, Chris, I do believe that the people from Canada negotiating at the table for these last number of days have put it all on the line. They've done everything they possibly can. And if we need to be prepared to retaliate, that the government is ready to do that as well. I just hope they are making the right choices.
Well, I mean, information is dripping out. I shouldn't say it's total radio silence. RDI is reporting, for example, just now that it's tough, say their sources, and we're not there. So obviously this is going right up to this deadline by the sounds of it.
Yeah, they are. And, Mr. Trump is, he hasn't had a great amount of press the last couple of days. And maybe he wants to show a sign of strength that he's picking up for Americans against those dastardly Canadians. And he wants to send a message that he's in charge and he's the boss and he's going to make more money on tariffs. I fear that would be the outcome this evening because I think it really does have an impact on Canadian companies that's incredibly unfair and actually kind of goes after the heart of our economy, the small and medium-sized businesses and enterprises across the country. We call them mom and pop shops. That's exactly what they are. They would be really impeded in their ability to grow and survive, quite frankly.
Lisa Raitt, we appreciate you being with us tonight.
Great pleasure.
Lisa Raitt is a member of the Advisory Committee on Canada-U.S. Economic Relations.